now we are going to discuss the next topic today, which is the era of militant nationalism, the period from 1905 to 1909. This is me, Vani Mehra, and I welcome everybody to Vanicademy. Why militant nationalism grew? What was the reason behind it? Britishers' policy of divide and rule and their policy of carrot and stick had brought changes in the minds of the people. Target was one, that was freedom, nationalistic ideas, but means were different. Few believed in the constitutional ideas and few believed in the extremist ideas. It was extremely difficult to understand the kind of changes that Indian society was going through. Realization that the true nature of British rule was exploitative and British India government, instead of conceding more, was taking away what existed. It was simple. They never wanted Indians to progress. They wanted them to be suppressed. No petition, no propagation, no agenda, no resolution could replace the tyrannic rule of the Britishers on India. It was a very difficult job. What made them go far like that? People had to grow a lot of self-confidence and self-respect. They needed to understand that being under somebody or being under a British rule or British Raj was not their fate. They had to fight it till the end. And not only that, impact of growth of education was also seen. People were having awareness, and at the same time, they could also see rising wave of unemployment. When people are not employed, definitely anything and everything that attracts them with respect to money or monetary gain, they will go there. And this was the entire scenario at that time. International influences and events which demolished the myth of white or European supremacy. For example, emergence of Japan, an Asian country, as an industrial power. Abyssinia's Ethiopia victory over Italy. The Boer Wars from 1899 to 1902, in which the British had faced the reverses. These were certain issues. And then Japan's victory over Russia in 1905, which led to the nationalist movements worldwide. They were not expecting this, but this had to happen. This was destined to happen because people were getting intelligent. People were understanding that it was not the Britishers who are in favor of them, but against them. The reaction to increasing westernization, the increasing policies of the West. The new leadership had felt that stranglehold of excessive westernization and sensed the colonial designs to submerge the Indian national identity in the British Empire. A lot of leaders like Swami Vivekananda, Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, and Swami Dayanand Saraswati, they inspired many young nationalists with their forceful and articulate arguments, painting India's past in brighter colors than the British ideologues had. They talked about the myth of Western superiority by referring to richness of Indian civilization in the past. Dayanand's political message was India for the Indians. There was a dissatisfaction with the achievement as well as methods of moderates. The younger elements within the Congress were dissatisfied with the achievement of moderates during the first 15 to 20 years. They were strongly critical of the methods of peaceful and constitutional agitation. Moderates had used the 3 Ps. What were the 3 Ps? If you remember, the first was prayer. The second was petition. And the third one was protest. And they said that these decisions were political mendicancies. Curzon's reactionary policy, like the imposition of Calcutta Corporation Act, Official Secrets Act, Indian University Act, Partition of Bengal. These policies had brought a fire amongst the Indians. and there was an existence of a militant school of thought already. By the dawn of 20th century, a band of nationalist thinkers had emerged who advocated a more militant approach to political work. For example, Raj Narayan Bose, Ashwini Kumar Datta, Aurobindo Ghosh, and Bipin Chandra Pal in Bengal. And on the contrary, Vishnu Shastri Chiplunkar, Bal Gangadhar Tilak in Maharashtra, and Lala Rajpat Rai in Punjab. Tilak emerged as the most outstanding representative of the school of thought. What were the basic tenets of the school of thought? Number one, hatred for foreign rule. Since no hope could be derived from it, Indians should work out their own salvation. लोगों को अपने लिए खुद काम करना पड़ेगा. Swaraj to be the goal of national movement. अगर आपको independence चाहिए, national movement का कोई objective चाहिए, then it is nothing but Swaraj. Self-rule. Swaraj. And direct political action was required. They also talked about कि masses की capacity इतनी ज़्यादा अच्छी थी कि authorities को challenge करने के लिए बहुत थी. And personal sacrifices required, and a true nationalist to always be ready for it. So, there was an emergence of a trained leadership. Yes, the new leadership could provide a proper channelization of immense potential for political struggle, which the masses possessed, and as the militant nationalists thought, they were ready to give expression to. This energy of masses got a release during the movement against the partition of Bengal, which acquired the form of Swadeshi agitation also. It was for Indians. Indian wanted to be free. Indian wanted to have their self-rule. On the contrary, extremist ideology was very different. There was a hatred for foreign rule. They never wanted the foreigners to be part of India. They never wanted to serve under the foreigners. The moderate-led movement had failed to yield the results. So the extremists came forward. And they talked about how they could influence this movement. They had the belief in the capacity of masses. They said that masses were able to do bigger things. The goal was Swarajya, and political action was definitely required. This is the most important phase of history. Yes, as revolt of 1857 was the most remarkable thing that happened in the history, the partition of Bengal also has a very important place in our modern Indian history. It began as a reaction to partition of Bengal, which was known in 1903 and formally announced in July 1905. What was the major motive behind partition of Bengal? Britishers said that Bengal was too big to be administered. It was too big in size, which was true to some extent, but the motive was not this. The motive was to weaken Bengal. Bengal को कमजोर करना, ये target था Britishers का. Because Bengal nerve center था Indian nationalist activity का. वहीं से बहुत ज़्यादा nationalist activities rise कर दी. It had given rise to a lot of nationalist activity. And the official reason given for the partition was this, which was all false, not completely true. Moderate-led anti-partition movement was under Surendranath Banerjee, K.K. Mitra, and Prithvish Chandra Ray. What were the methods they used? Again, they used the 3 Ps, public meetings, petitions, propaganda, through newspaper and pamphlets. But the extremists, who were Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, Lala Rajpat Rai, Aurobindo Ghosh, they did not do this because for them it was not a peaceful movement. So they had boycott of the foreign cloth and other goods, public meetings and processions. They formed corps of volunteers or samitis, and the use of traditional popular festivals and melas for propaganda. They said that people have to believe in self-reliance और आत्मशक्ति. अगर लोग खुद पे believe नहीं करेंगे, तो वो किसी भी तरह से nationalistic ideas को बढ़ा नहीं पाएंगे और freedom तो बिल्कुल नहीं पा पाएंगे. स्वदेशी और national education की बात की गई. Foreign goods को damage किया गया, foreign cloth को burn किया गया, liquor को waste किया गया. And they initiated a new trend in Indian painting, song, poetry, and pioneered research in science, and later calling for boycott of school, college, council, and government service also. Extremists took extreme steps, yes, because It was not very easy. It is said that it was easy, but it was not very easy. They had to take these steps because of the failure of moderates to achieve positive results. A lot of tactics of governments of both Bengals, severe government repression was there, and extremists had to take these steps. People participated at a mass rate. Students were a part of it. Women participated, and other sections of zamindari labor and lower middle and middle classes in towns and cities also participated for the first time, while the Muslims generally kept away. Why people participated in the movement? It is important to understand that partition of Bengal was about to affect everybody, not one section of society, but everybody. And because people participated, they understood the grievance, or you can say the severity of the partition that they were heading towards. In the period of 1903 to 1905, leadership was provided by men like Surendranath Banerjee, K.K. Mitra, and Prithvish Chandra Ray. They had talked about issues in newspapers also. Just not they were fighting here and there. The moderates had written newspapers like Hitabadi, Sanjeevani, and the Bengali. But this could not exert enough pressure on the Britishers. So it was important to get everybody together, and this was done by the extremists. They were able to carry forward everyone. It is important to understand that extremists also gave a very important slogan, which was political freedom is the life breath of a nation. Political freedom is the life breath of a nation. This was declared by Aurobindo Ghosh, who was an extremist. All the kind of processions, all the kind of corporations, all the kind of traditional popular festivals and melas, like Tilak celebrated Ganapati and Shivaji festivals and became a medium of Swadeshi propaganda, not only in Western India, but also in Bengal. So traditional folk theatre forms were used for this purpose. Self-reliance was focused. National education was focused. Indigenous enterprises were focused. And there was a huge impact in the cultural sphere also, because Rabindranath Tagore, Rajnikant Sen, Mukund Das, Sayyid Abu Muhammad, and others. Tagore's Amar Sonar Bangla, very, very important. Tagore's Amar Sonar Bangla, which was written on this occasion, was later to inspire liberation struggle of Bangladesh and was adopted by it as its national anthem. So Tamil Nadu, Subramanya Bharati Road, Sudesha Geetam. These were all the kind of ideas that were being brought forward. People participated, women had to participate. They were to play a significant role in national movement. They were not suppressed anymore. But Muslims, some of the Muslims participated, not all of them, like Abdul Rasul, Liaquat Hussain, Ghuznavi, Maulana Azad, but most of the upper and middle class Muslims stayed away. To further government interest, All India Muslim League was propped up on December 30th, 1905. That's very important. Muslim League had come up in 1905 in an anti-Congress front, and reactionary elements like Nawab Salimullah of Dhaka were encouraged. And nature of Swadeshi movement, with leaders evoking Hindu festivals and goddesses for inspiration, they tended to exclude Muslims. Muslims thought that if they are celebrating Hindu festivals, that they're not talking about them. So they got very, very upset with that also. It had changed the perspective on all India level. Why Swadeshi movement fizzled out by 1908? It's very important to understand. Because government had put a lot of pressure, a lot of repression. It also wasn't able to create such an effective organization or a party structure. It threw up an entire gamut of techniques that later came to be associated with Gandhian politics, like non-cooperation, passive resistance, filling of British jails, social reform, constructive work, but failed to give these techniques a disciplined focus. They were not able to give it a focus. They were not able to follow it properly. Also, arrest and deportation of all leaders, the movement left leaderless. Aurobindo Ghosh and Bipin Chandra Pal, they retired from active politics. So yes, the movement did not have an active leader. And not only that, movement allows the people but did not know how to tap the newly released energy. It's like somebody comes and tells you, you should become an IAS, you should become an IAS, you should become an IAS. But once you start your preparation, you don't have motivation anymore. Nobody is there to motivate you. Then what are you going to do? It's going to be very, very difficult for you to carry forward your motivation every single day. So energy was increased. People were told, yes, we need to struggle, we need to do this, we need to achieve our targets, we need to get Swaraj. But how to do it? They were not being told about it. Non-cooperation and passive resistance remained mere ideas. People did not practice them very popularly. And at the same time, it is difficult to sustain a mass-based movement at a high pitch for too long. It's difficult. Absolutely. But there was a turning point in the movement. Despite the gradual decline into inactivity, the movement was a turning point in modern Indian history. It proved to be a leap forward. Because hitherto untouched sections participated, women participated, students participated, जिनसे expected नहीं था, जिन लोगों की participation बहुत सालों से बंद थी, रुकी हुई थी, all of them participated, and major trends of later movement emerged. Richness of the movement extended to culture, science, and literature. People educated in bolder form of politics, colonial hegemony undermined. So yes, all of them participated. Swadeshi campaign undermined the hegemony of colonial ideas. Future struggle was to draw heavily from the experience gained. जो यहाँ से सीखा वो आगे बहुत काम आने वाला था. It's just like कि आपको लाइफ में कोई फेलियर होता है, उससे आप बहुत कुछ सीखते हैं. Similarly, इससे बहुत कुछ सीखने को मिला. Indians understood how they had to go forward. But moderates and extremists could not take it for a very long time. They had differences in their opinions. Moderates को चाहिए था एक constitutional mean, extremists को चाहिए था एक extremist mean. Moderates के ideas जो थे वो western थे, liberal thought के, European history के. Extremists के ideas जो थे वो cultural heritage के थे, Hindu traditional symbols के थे. Moderates England की providential mission in India के ऊपर believe करते थे, but extremists इसे reject करते थे. Moderates की loyalty थी British crown के towards, but extremists believe करते थे कि British crown was unworthy of claiming Indian loyalty. Moderates demanded constitutional reforms and extremists demanded Swaraj as the panacea for Indian ills. Moderates were patriots and did not play the role of a comprador, but extremists were patriots who made sacrifices for the sake of the country. So moderates did not reach the masses. No all India campaigns of scale of Swadeshi and boycott had been organized earlier by moderates. This was the first time. और extremist की जो ideology थी और इसकी functioning थी, it lacked consistency because it had open members. People used to come, join it, काम करके चले जाते थे, कुछ लोग डर जाते थे, कुछ लोग हट जाते थे. So there was a split amongst the moderates and extremists. They wanted to restrict the boycott movement to Bengal and to a boycott of foreign cloth and liquor only. But extremists wanted to take the movement to all parts of country and include within its ambit all forms of association. उन्होंने कहा कि एक नहीं, दो नहीं, सब तरह के associations होनी चाहिए. चाहे वो बच्चों के साथ schools में हो, चाहे colleges में हो, चाहे law courts में हो, चाहे legislative councils में हो या government service या municipalities में हो. Everywhere it required togetherness. It required them to come together. And that is why there was a split which was seen, which is also called as the split of the moderates and extremists very popularly. The split took place in Nagpur session with Tilak or Lajpat Rai as the president, along with the reiteration of Swadeshi boycott and national education resolution. Moderates wanted the session at Surat in order to exclude Tilak from presidency. Since the leader from the host province could not be a session president, Instead, they wanted Ras Bihari Ghosh as the president, and they sought to drop the resolution on Swadeshi boycott and national education. दोनों sides rigid position पे खड़ी हो गई and left no room for compromise. So split became inevitable, and Congress was now dominated by moderates who lost no time in reiterating Congress' commitment to the goal of self-government within the British Empire and to the use of constitutional methods only to achieve this goal. And yes, this split was not very healthy because government acts for repression of Swadeshi movement were passed. The Seditious Meetings Act of 1907. The legislation included such acts which were being passed: Criminal Law Amendment Act, Indian Newspapers Act, Offences Act, Explosive Substances Act, and Indian Press Act. Tilak was the main extremist leader, and he was tried in 1909 for sedition for what he had written. उन्होंने 1908 में केसरी के अंदर बॉम्ब के बारे में एक डिस्क्रिप्शन लिखी थी कि a bomb which was thrown by Bengal revolutionaries in Muzaffarpur, which resulted in the death of 2 innocent European women. For that, he was being confined under the Seditious Act. So he had written something. I'm going to tell you this. No doubt will inspire many with hatred against the people belonging to the party of rebels. It is not possible to cause British rule to disappear from this country by such monstrous deeds, but rulers who exercise unrestricted power must always remember that there is also a limit to the patience of humanity. Many newspapers had warned the government that if they resorted to Russian methods, then Indians too will be compelled to imitate the Russian methods. He also wrote that real means of stopping the bombs consisted in making a beginning towards the grant of rights of Swarajya to the people. And for all of that he had written, he was being judged guilty and sentenced to 6 years of transportation and a fine of ₹1,000. He was sent to Mandalay, Burma jail for 6 years. Aurobindo and Bipin Chandra Pal retired from active politics, and Lala Lajpat Rai left for abroad. Extremists were not able to organize an effective alternative party to sustain the movement, because if there are no leaders, you can't lead a party. You can't lead any movement if there is no leader into it. So after 1908, national movement as a whole declined for a time, and 1914 में Tilak was released and he picked up the threads of the movement from there itself. Wahi se he started again. At this very point of time came the very famous 1909 Morley-Minto reforms. 1906 कुछ मुस्लिम एलीट्स ने शिमला डेपुटेशन बुलाई जिसे लीड कर रही थी आगा खान, who met Lord Minto and demanded separate electorates. Very important. This is very, very important for all of us to understand. Separate electorates की डिमांड की थी आगा खान ने. इनके हिसाब से number of elected members in imperial and provincial legislative councils increase होनी चाहिए थी, and it increased. Elected non-officials still remained in minority. Non-officials to be elected indirectly, thus elections introduced for the first time. Not only that, separate electorates were introduced for Muslims, and this was the seeds of communalism that was sown in the history of India. Legislatures could pass resolution, ask questions and supplementaries, vote separate items of the budget also. Morley-Minto reforms translated into Indian Council Act of 1909 very soon. If we understand, according to a very famous author, in the Imperial Council of 69 members, 37 were to be officials and 32 non-officials, 5 were to be nominated. And of them, 27 non-officials, 8 seats were reserved for the Muslims under separate electorates. That means they wanted to give this, the idea of separatism was sown over here. Besides separate electorates for Muslims, representation in excess of strength of their population was according to Muslims. And the income qualification for Muslim voters were kept lower than that for Hindus. So definitely, a lot of changes were done at that time in the Morley-Minto reforms. One Indian was to be appointed to the Viceroy Executive Council. So Satyendra Sinha was the first Indian to be appointed in 1909. Satyendra Sinha. But did it have any solution to the problems? No. One Indian. It aimed at dividing the nationalist ranks and at rallying the moderates and Muslims to the government side. No responsibility entrusted to legislatures. This resulted in thoughtless criticism sometimes. And system of election was too indirect. So did it solve the problem? No. Constitutional reforms were in fact aimed at dividing the nationalist ranks by confusing the moderates and checking the growth of unity among Indians through the obnoxious instrument of separate electorates. This was a time when separate electorates came up and Indians were disunited. They always talked about the ideas of unity, but now they were disunited. Besides this, the system of election was too indirect and gave impression of infiltration of legislatures through a number of seals. So if I talk about parliamentary forms, they were introduced. No responsibility was conceded, which sometimes led to thoughtless and irresponsible criticism also. If I talk in the lines of Gopal Krishna Gokhale, then let me tell you, he put to constructive use the opportunity to debate in the councils by demanding the universal primary education. He said कि education सबका अधिकार है और repressive policies के ऊपर attack करना चाहिए. Draw attention to the plight of indentured labor and Indian workers in South Africa. 1909 के जो reforms they gave to the people of country a shadow rather than a substance. People had demanded self-government, but what they were given was benevolent despotism. And that was a great betrayal on the part of the trust that was imposed by the moderates into the British government. And with this, we end this session and we end this chapter as well, thereof militantism. And at the same time, we've also ended the era from the period of 1905 to 1909. It's important to understand the kind of changes that were taking place in our country during this period. In the next video, we will be talking from 1907 to 1917, the first phase of the revolutionary activities, in which we'll understand what was revolutionary activities and how they were taking place in our country. Thank you very much. Like the video and post out your questions in the comment section if there are any. Take care of yourself. All the best.